What's up, world? This is Jason. Welcome back. I have 5 tips for you if you are a wedding or an event photographer. These are some tips that I don't see being discussed very often. They're things that I actually just thought of that I thought, what doesn't get discussed enough that deserves a spotlight on. So these are the 5 things, right? The first thing is to respond quickly to text messages and emails. This is kind of obvious, and that's why I'm mentioning it first. But it bears noting and it bears repeating because I know that for myself, if I don't respond to emails or text messages immediately, then it might take a few hours or even like a few days to respond. So knowing myself, and maybe you're the same way. If I respond immediately, then it serves to it has two benefits to it, I find. One is they usually respond with like, oh wow, thanks for responding so quickly. It kind of tells me that other vendors that they use may not have the same response time. So you've got kind of like a leg up on competition, or a leg up on other vendors. And then the second is that it creates a momentum in terms of the conversation. If you wait a few hours or wait a day for a response, then I find that that amount of time is kind of reflected back to you in terms of their response to your response. So, what you want to do is you always want to be like maximizing your time and your efficiency. So, if you're responding in 3 hours and you get a response 3 hours later, you've got 6 hours that you've just kind of like not talked, right? Whereas if you respond immediately, they're probably still at their desk or they're probably still, holding their phone. And so they can follow up on their inquiry and the conversation begins from there. And, you can maybe even schedule something or book something, within 30 minutes of that initial email. So, that's the second benefit to it. The second tip that I have is being on time is being late. I know a lot of athletic coaches. You know they they preach this in their locker rooms that if you're on time for practice, then that means you're late for practice. So essentially, what that means is just be early, right? Just be running early for everything. That gives you plenty of time to um, run into traffic and still be on time, still be early, or like if you make a wrong turn and end up in New Jersey when you're supposed to be in Midtown in rush hour, you know, which is something that's happened to me before. You're going to be thanking your lucky stars that you were running an hour early, and then you just arrive like 2 minutes before you're supposed to start. But that's neither here nor there. Um, that's a lesson that was kind of taught to me since like the first time I ever was hired as a third shooter or a second shooter was to arrive where I needed to be at least 30 minutes early. And that's just something that I've kind of kept with throughout all my years because it's served me well. And the less stress that you arrive with on the day of your event, the better your day is going to be, and the better your day is, the better your photos are going to be, right? The third tip I have is always have a joke on hand, or two, or three. It's always good to have more than one, just so you can read the room and see what's appropriate or not. The reason why you want to have a joke is there was one time where I was doing portraits and their colleagues were off to the side, and I don't particularly remember if they were having a hard time being comfortable or smiling or not, but one of the colleagues was like, "Oh, anybody have a joke?" And I was standing there taking pictures, taking the portraits, and I'm thinking like, "Oh, that would be really useful to have, is to have a joke, because it does come up, where somebody's like, oh, say something funny, right? But then when somebody says say something funny, you know, everything that that's funny gets like disappears out of your mind, right? And it becomes awkward, and then yeah. So it's good to have a joke in mind. Just always have it in your back pocket so that you can pull it out when you need it and save the day, right? The fourth tip I have for you is to know and follow fashion trends. You don't necessarily have to buy into them and dress, in like super trendy stuff. Like I'm super not trendy at all. I have my own style and I kind of stick to it. But I also am aware of, what works and what doesn't work and why. And it's for me, it served me well to know the rules of fashion, um, especially, you know, dressed up. Like you should know how to tie a bow tie. You should know that. You should know how to, pin a boutonniere on. A little sewing here and there, putting the veil on, which way the veil goes, things like that. It's There are little things to know, but they go a long way in terms of when you're able to utilize that. Because if you're filming, or if you're photographing the groomsmen getting ready and they all have bow ties, you know they're all gonna spend 30 minutes watching YouTube videos on how to tie a bow tie. But if you can kind of step in and show them directly, then they're like, wow, this, like it's such a small thing, right? To know how to tie a bow tie, but when it comes in handy, it goes a long way because then you've got the groomsmen on your side for the rest of the day, and they're all like, "Oh, like this guy knows what he's doing. Like he hooked, like guaranteed. Like if you teach them, how to tie a bow tie." At some point during the day, they're gonna be like, "Yo, the photographer like hooked us up. And, he knows how to do it. So like, he helped us. And it's not like they're gonna be eating out of your hands for the whole day, but they're gonna be on your side because they know that you know what you're doing. And even if you don't know what you're doing, just knowing that kind of signifies that that you're experienced, that you're under control, and that you know what you're doing pretty much. And that's half the battle really is the client's confidence in you and being able to get all your work done, right? So, like an example of that I use all the time, since maybe my first wedding was to adjust the groom's or the guy's jacket, right? Because most of the time when they're standing and they're posing for a photo, they're not like they're not like arranged properly, right? But if you're able to rearrange them a tiny bit, and then like let's say like the sleeve is kind of like the sleeve is under the jacket, and then you kind of like reveal a little bit of sleeve so that it kind of like frames the arm. Little things like that is like nobody really knows that, but then when you point it out, people are like, oh, that's kind of cool, like that makes sense. And that kind of gives you, you know like a feather in your hat where the client is like, oh, this person actually knows what they're doing. Or it's just kind of like it builds kind of like a rapport or like a confidence between the client and yourself, because you know what you're doing. And for me, following fashion blogs and channels and things like that, it's kind of fun. It's interesting for me. But if it's not interesting for you, it's something that you should know anyways, or be aware of. Just because, like what I said, like a little goes a long way. And if you can kind of um, teach somebody like during the day something like that, then I think it helps people kind of work with you, and it makes your day a lot easier. And the last tip that I have is whenever I go to a venue, any venue, even if it's like corporate or whatever, I always introduce myself and do a little small talk with with the other vendors. Not for networking purposes really, but just so that you want to like kind of kill them with kindness. They're not like your enemies; they're your teammates, and so you kind of want to make sure that you arrive and you're like, we're all on the same team, right? And you can't like arrive and be like, you need to do this, you need to do that, right? Um, what I'll do is I'll introduce myself to, let's say, the videographer, and I'll ask him what lens he's using so that I know, like, if he's shooting wide, then I'm limited more towards where I can walk so that I'm not in his shot. But if he's shooting telephoto and narrow, then I'm more free to walk around everywhere. So it's not necessarily that I'm gonna abide by his guidelines or whatnot, but just to just so that I'm aware of his, you know, his field of vision, and that and then I make myself aware of like how I work. Um, it's essentially like kind of like getting people on the same page as you, and kind of deferring to um, their work. It leaves yourself vulnerable, but at the same time, it's you're being courteous. You're being you're showing them that it's not just about me. It's about the final product, and if everybody's working together and if everybody's on the same page, then it's a smooth day, right? So a lot of times, um, well, actually, most times when I speak with the videographers and everybody else that's working together, they'll be like, "Hey, I appreciate you asking before we begin, like what you know, you know, where you're gonna stand, and things like that." Because and a lot of times they're like, "Oh yeah, the last photographer that I worked with or that we worked with, they, I got the back of his head the whole time, blah blah blah." And they're like, "I appreciate you, asking about that." And once you have them on your side, it's like even if you are in their frame, like they're okay with it because you know you're on the same team, right? And they know that if you are in the picture, like you're in it because you have to be, not because you're unaware of your surroundings, right? It's good to have like that's tip number 6 is you should have eyes in the back of your head. You should always be aware of like what's behind you, because you don't want to be that guy that's like blocking the view for everybody, right? Nobody's there to see you. Nobody is at that event because you're photographing it. They're at the event because of they want to see what you're photographing. So if you're in the way, then that kind of ruins the experience for a lot of people, and that's like that's like not a compliment. That's like a critique that I hear a lot about other photographers and videographers, where they're like, "Oh yeah, they set up station like right in front of the altar, so like nobody was able to see the kiss," or you know, it's like honestly, like um, you gotta be aware of like what's behind you, and you have to read the room and know you know um, that they're not there for you, they're there for the people in front of you, so don't be in anybody's way. So yeah, so there's 5 tips, but yeah, there's 6, so you guys got a little bonus. Yeah, I am still having a hard time trying to find a way to end these things, so I just kind of like turn off the video. So there you go, bye.